What is up, everybody? Welcome back for another episode. Today, we're going to be talking about how to adjust your workouts when you're injured. Okay, so first things first, let's figure out if it's an injury or a tweak. Now, there's a big difference between an injury and a tweak. An injury means that you have something going on that should be looked at by a doctor and should be treated with the help of that doctor and a physical therapist to get you back in shape to get to where you want to be so that way you don't keep making it worse. A tweak is something that will occasionally happen from time to time. Now, to figure out the difference between a tweak or an injury, just check out episode 198 with Dr. Susie Spurlock, who is a physical therapist. And at around the 25-minute mark, she gives a really good traffic light analogy to figure out exactly if it's a tweak or an injury. And then also the last guest, Dr. Sam Karaga, she actually did a very good explanation on how to get back into training when you have some sort of an injury and really good tips. So if you haven't checked out those episodes yet, highly recommend it in conjunction with this one. So again, back to injuries. So if you are truly injured, you need to be under the guidance of a physical therapist and possibly even like a surgeon. And if it's something that's a really truly bad injury that needed that level of intervention. Okay, now a tweak is something that happens on occasion for pretty much anybody who decides to participate in an active lifestyle. It can happen if you're golfing, if you're running, if you're weightlifting, if you're doing pretty much any form of activity, like any group class, like you'll eventually experience it at one point or another. Now, that being said, it's not a reason to avoid exercise because, as stated here, I know it's been reiterated from, I think I originally heard this from Eric Cressy, and he said an orthopedist, but I kind of touched it up and said physical therapist visit beats the hell out of having to see the cardiologist. Now, should you see both? Absolutely. But that being said, when it comes to the types of issues, we would rather deal with mechanical ones rather than having heart issues or all the issues that come with being inactive, gaining weight, having excess body fat and things like that. So when it comes with the trade-off, it's always worth it to have a minor tweak here and there and stay active for all the other benefits that you're going to experience that are going to really outweigh the brief pain if you handle it correctly. Okay. Now, the key when it comes to a tweak is to learn how to work around the tweak instead of working through them. Don't just ignore it and keep doing the same thing and waiting until it gets worse and worse and worse. Okay. Because working through tweaks can result in progressing into a full on injury. And working around it will get you back to 100% faster. So you're going to be pain free quicker and you're going to get better results by working around it. Okay, so when it comes to reducing your risk for a tweak, right now, being that we're in the middle of July, people are going on vacations, people are taking breaks from their fitness. And the second they get right back into it, they're going to try and jump right back into what they were doing, go right back to the weight they were using, doing as many sets and reps as they were doing before. And that's a setup for disaster. Ease back in. Okay. So when you come back for the first day back from vacation or after a few weeks off, just go in with the thought of, let's see what my body's going to give me. Do some extra warm up sets, do some lighter ones, really feel it out and rev yourself back up. Don't just jump right in. Okay? And don't max out on day one when it comes to reps or weight. So let's say you're doing a group class. Don't jump in the most intense one on your first day back. Go into one that you know is a little bit lighter, or if you don't have that option, do your own workout in a gym or at home that's a little bit lighter before going into that super intense workout. Um, and try and figure out if you can what caused previous tweaks. So if you've had them in the past and you're like, oh, it was this one exercise, or oh, it was after I had crap sleep and I was traveling, like try and figure out what exactly was the reason and then plan as best you can to minimize it instead of just straight up ignoring it and being surprised when you're like, wow, that hurts again. I wonder why. Okay. Now, the main priority is pain-free movement. Okay. That is the number one thing we want to focus on. Now, when I say pain-free, that doesn't mean that it's not going to be uncomfortable. That doesn't mean that it's not going to burn, like the good type of pain. We want to separate good versus bad. Now, when I get into this topic, just know I am telling you from a personal trainer's perspective who has consulted with a ton of PTs, have a lot of friends who are PTs. I'm just giving you guys the stuff that I've learned over the years that have done really well with certain clients and making sure that they get to a pain-free place or a place where they have less pain or just that they're able to do stuff. Now, this does not take place of medical advice. Got to slap that disclaimer on. Okay. It does not take place from seeing a doctor or a physical therapist. You should definitely see them if you feel like you should. But that being said, take this all with a grain of salt, and I'll just get that out of the way now. Okay, so actually, let me back it up. Good versus bad pain. So if it's bad pain, that's usually the stuff like in the joints that's radiating, that's sharp, that is really not good. You kind of know that it has that signal to your body like, oh, this is no bueno. And then the good pain is like when you are tired, when you are feeling the burn that comes from doing multiple repetitions, when you feel like you can't do another repetition because your body is involuntarily slowing down and you feel really tired. That's the good stuff. That's the stuff that we want to chase for brief moments during the workout and then following it up with adequate rest. So it always helps to separate good versus bad pain. So when it comes to pain-free movement, okay, a lot of times when people get hurt, they just stop moving completely. Now, this might be due to the advice from their doctor, which is why I always tell people when you're going to get your advice as far as like how to return to activity, physical therapists will usually give you the best advice in that situation. Now, if you get it straight from the surgeon, a lot of times, if it's somebody who's stuck in their ways that just has not kept up with the continuing literature, or it's just somebody that practices very scared, then they will tell you don't move at all. And it's more of a cover your ass statement rather than doing right by you. And in most cases, motion is lotion. But that being said, like obviously, if you got surgery or something, you need to be under the guidance of a physical therapist to grade the exposure of how much you can do on a specific movement at a specific angle. Like if you are doing that transition and you get operated on, make sure you have a physical therapist and make sure that physical therapist transitions you to a personal trainer. So that way you have a nice smooth transition instead of just being like, all right, I got cleared, I'm going to jump right back in. And then that usually never ends well. But that being said, remember, motion is lotion. If we can stay active in a pain-free way for whatever's going on, that is the goal. Because if you stay active, you're going to recover faster. Okay. So find a variation of whatever that exercise is, if possible. So, like, let's say something's bothering you, like a squat, try and find another squat variation that you're able to do. Because, again, that's going to speed up the healing process and it's going to reinforce your healthy lifestyle. That's really the big problem when it comes to just take time off. Just don't move, don't exercise for a couple weeks. That gets us out of our rhythm. That stops us from showing up for ourselves day in and day out. And that whole identity of I'm a fit person, I'm an active person goes out the window for that brief moment in time. And then starting back up is so much harder than it was before when you were in the rhythm. So we don't want to lose that momentum. Now, when it comes to different variations, you can adjust a lot of different things about the exercise. So I'm going to give you a couple of my favorites and give you some examples here. So first off is reducing the range of motion. So let's take the squat, for example, again. Let's say your knees are, you tweak something that they're just feeling weird. Maybe you sat wrong or something like that. Okay. Try doing half repetitions, like sit down to a box or a bench and just do down to that level if it's pain free, like as long as you're not feeling it in your knee and it's not shooting down your leg or anything like that. And you can do that and progressively load, like go a little bit heavier without feeling bad pain, do that. And then you can experiment because sometimes when you get stronger in partial ranges of motion and you stop pissing off that area, then it allows it to heal and it heals faster. And then you'll see that sometimes it allows you to increase the range of motion and go a little bit lower week after week or month after month as it's healing and as you're getting stronger. So sometimes that can help a lot. Next is slowing down the tempo. A lot of times, and also utilizing pauses where necessary because these both tie into tension. A lot of times people experience tweaks because they lose tension. They don't have any intention when they're doing their exercises. They're just saying, oh, I'm just doing whatever it is. I'm not really focusing on it. I'm looking at the person. across the room. I'm talking to my friend. I'm thinking about my list, and then something goes wrong. If you are truly exercising the way that you should be in the most effective way possible, you shouldn't be able to think about anything else. Because if you're trying to like put on lean muscle, burn body fat, you should be pushing it to the point where your mind goes blank because all you can think about is, I just need to get that next repetition. And a lot of people don't work out with that type of intensity. A lot of times you see people doing their bench presses with open hands and they're just up and down, not really doing a whole lot of anything, or they're squatting and they're wiggling all over the place. You should be locked in. You should be squeezing every muscle in your entire body, because when you do that, when you create that tension, it cushions your joints, because when your muscles are tensed up, it will provide that cushion that your body needs to support heavy loads. If you're just treating it like it's nothing, then you're setting yourself up for something bad to happen. Or you're just setting yourself up not to get any results whatsoever, and you're just spinning your wheels and not really getting a whole lot out of it. Next is higher repetitions, lower weight. Now, this kind of is contradictory to what I just said, but let me explain. When I say higher repetitions, lower weight, that doesn't mean not challenging weight. That means raise your repetitions, which means that if you are truly pushing it as hard as you should be, where you have maybe 2 or 3 repetitions left when you stop, then you will have to use lighter weights on higher repetitions. Because if you did as many as you possibly can for, say, 5 reps, there's no way in hell, it is physically impossible for you to do that exact same weight for 15 repetitions. Now, if you take, like, say 10 pounds off of that and you can get 15 repetitions, but you stop and maybe you could get 16 or 17 repetitions, that's what I mean by higher repetitions, lower weight. It's still the same grade of difficulty. You still only have that 1 or 2 reps left, maybe 3 left in the tank at the very end of the set. That's the key. And what happens here is when you raise the repetitions and you can't use as much weight, sometimes when it's a load issue, when the weight is really the issue, because for some reason your body cannot stabilize or tense up enough to support that weight, but the motion doesn't necessarily hurt, then you can get a lot out of it and be able to do it in a pain-free way. And then down the road, you can decrease the repetitions and increase the weight as you go. And then we're getting into that graded exposure. You're slowly easing in instead of just going right into the heavy weight. Okay, next is changing the angle. Sometimes people just don't do good with certain angles, like flat barbell bench, for example. All of a sudden, you make it an incline bench press and bang, everything's fine. And it's just, for some reason, some angles for some people, based on injury history, based on their anatomy, just isn't right. And that's totally fine, because we're all very different anatomically. Sometimes we can't do certain things in the way that's traditional, or quote unquote the right way, which is absolute bullshit anyway. There is no right way to do any exercise other than the way that keeps you pain free, that you can get stronger and build more muscle on. And that can be very different for many people, but I'll stop myself before I go on a tangent. Next is different modalities. So, like, let's say barbell. Barbell is just not working for you. Every time you do a deadlift from the floor, it just hurts like hell on your lower back. Or when you do barbell bench press, it destroys your shoulders. Okay, try dumbbells, try bands, try the landmine with the barbell. Like, try a different machine. Sometimes you're able to do the movement, but with a different way of doing it. And all of a sudden, it's pain free. You could get more bang for your buck and you feel like a million bucks at the end instead of always hurting. And then last but not least is one of my personal favorites, is freeing the scap. So when I say the scap, I mean the scapula. When people do like bench press, for example, they will pinch their shoulders down and back, which is proper form for bench press. Now, that being said, for some people that can really irritate the shoulders if there's no variation, because when your shoulder is in a fixed position and it doesn't flow nice and freely, then sometimes that can cause issues. Now, if you take bench press, for example, and let's say you get rid of it and swap it for push-ups, you might feel really good. Or like a landmine press, you might feel really good. And then once you're back to feeling really good, you can incorporate the bench press, but have on another day, or maybe as your second exercise, something that is a exercise that allows your scapula to move freely, like a push-up, like a landmine press, like a fly, something like that. Now, when it comes to a lot of people, when they go back to the gym, they usually go right back to the exact same routine because they don't know any different and because they like those exercises. But if you keep going back to the same variation without addressing mobility and or stability issues that caused it in the first place, you will most likely keep getting hurt, because if you're not changing anything, why would the result be any different? Okay, so if you don't want to address it, that's also totally fine. A lot of times, like a lot of people who are busy professionals just don't have the time to devote to mobility and stability work that would be required to be able to do certain movements, like working on their shoulder mobility so they could properly back squat. And that's fine. Just pick a variation that doesn't have the same demands on those joints. So, for example, like instead of doing a barbell back squat, do a landmine or a goblet squat, because then you don't need the flexibility and mobility in your shoulders to get back to that point. Now it's all in front and you're not going to hurt yourself and you're going to be able to do the squat. Now, so I beat myself to the punch. So, for example, if you have a bum shoulder all the time and you keep doing barbell back squats, try what I just said. Do landmine, do goblet squats, or if you have a safety squat bar where it has the handles in the front that go over your shoulders, those also reduce pretty much all the strain on the shoulders, and give those a try. And that'll create less demand on the shoulder and result in potentially less pain and better results. And also, to back it up, this is actually an issue I had when I was powerlifting back few years back. I kept doing barbell back squat and barbell bench press, and the combination of that really pissed off my shoulders. Now, I swapped the squats out for safety squat bar ones, where again I didn't have that demand, all of a sudden my shoulders felt better during bench press, and I was able to do more volume, which improved the results. So it doesn't mean that you have to get rid of everything. It just means that you got to reduce the amount of strain that is not helping to improve the amount of work you can put in down the road sometimes. So it comes down to finding that perfect mix of exercises and volume. So, some simple tips to reduce pain. Again, these are just tips that I've used over the years when training people in person, online, that have worked really, really well, that have allowed them to get through the or work around the tweaks and get back to 100% faster. Again, you should always be doing this under the guidance of a medical professional, physical therapist, surgeon, whatever, and make sure that they sign off on this stuff, because there are a lot of different things that could cause issues. And it's always good to get a trained eye and a very educated opinion. Um, so when it comes to the neck issues, one of the best things you can do, I say this as my neck is tweaked, and this is pretty much the playbook I've been following that got me back on track. Okay. Supporting your head. So whether that's going to the floor. So if you are doing, say, bench press and that arch in your back is creating tension on your neck, then just go down to the floor and do floor presses instead. Or let's say you're doing core work, make sure that your head stays on the ground or that you have a pillow behind your head. So that way your neck is supported and you can still do the core work without pissing off your neck. Um, Avoid or reduce upper back pulling, like doing face pulls, reverse flies, anything that's going to involve the traps and the rear delts is usually going to piss it off, at least in my experience. So it can help just to toss it for a week or two, or again, use the tips I said before, use less weight, higher reps, slow down the tempo in a way that could be pain free. And if you can, awesome. But if it just keeps pissing it off because you just keep hitting the same spot, it's okay to let go of some exercises for a week or two. This is a long game. If you want to stay fit for life, you're going to be doing this for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. 1 week is not going to be a big deal. Next is improving T-spine rotation if possible. A lot of times people can have issues with a lot of their upper body when it comes to the neck, shoulders, elbows, wrists, and things like that from a lack of T-spine mobility. That's your thoracic spine. So it's like the upper half of your spine from your neck to, like, say, mid-chest-ish. And when you can improve that rotation, it can reduce some of the strain on the neck sometimes, and that could potentially help. So looking up thoracic spine mobility exercises can go a long way. I have some on the YouTube channel. If you guys want to check it out, just Google, or not Google, YouTube search T-spine rotations, and I've got a few versions of those. And then there's Also addressing the shoulder, elbow, and wrist mobility, stability if needed, because a lot of times the screamer is not the source. This comes from what's called the joint by joint approach. A lot of times the thing that hurts is not the thing causing the problem. It's something that's north or south. Like if it's your shoulder, it very well could be your neck, or it very well could be your elbow. So looking around and making sure that one, your form is good. That's why it always helps having a personal trainer or a physical therapist who addresses the movements, doesn't just hook you up to ice and stim and say have a good day. People that actually look at how you move can be an invaluable resource. So that can be a big help. Now, when it comes to shoulder issues, okay, checking your rowing and pressing form, again, having a trained eye. Now, I hope that you guys can see this on the YouTube or in the Fit 40 family. I'm basically going to demonstrate what I mean. When you press or row, it should look pretty similar. Like when you go forward and back, it should look about the same when you're doing a dumbbell press or a dumbbell row, anything like that. A lot of times when people have issues with their shoulder, it can be made worse by going too far with the elbow and not very far with the shoulder. So when you go, this is going to be this is going to be challenging. So when you go too far back with the elbow, your shoulder will naturally dump forward, and that puts a lot of pressure on the shoulder. Now, are people able to do this with dips and push-ups and be totally fine? Absolutely. Some people have built their shoulders to be resilient enough to handle that. Now, if your shoulder's pissed off and you keep doing that, and that's what's actually causing it, by not doing that, it can help a whole lot. So that can be improved by one, just making sure that your shoulder never gets in front of your elbow. So it might feel like you're doing like a half repetition, stopping your elbow at your side rather than pulling it as far back as you possibly can. Or what you could also do is work on T-spine mobility, because when you can get your shoulder to rotate around your rib cage more freely, that's what we're talking about when we talk about T-spine mobility. When that shoulder can move around your rib cage in a better way, you can get more out of that exercise and put more of an emphasis on the muscles in your back and the back of your shoulder rather than putting it all in the front of your shoulder, which could potentially be hurting from this. Consider trying floor presses. So same deal goes for bench pressing. Let's say you go down to your chest all the time with the barbell or the dumbbells. And again, that gets to the point where your elbows are way past your shoulders and that's causing a lot of pressure and it's not good. Then going to a floor press where your elbows physically cannot get past your shoulders and then pressing back up. Sometimes just doing that for a little bit of time, like say a month or two, is enough to reduce the amount of strain to the point where your shoulders can get back to being healthy. And then if you want to slowly go back to the way you were doing it to try and build more resilient shoulders, do that. But again, don't just jump back into the old weight you were using. That's probably just going to lead to pissing it off all over again. So just make sure that you're doing it slowly and allowing your body to adapt. Because a lot of times, sorry guys, I keep going off on tangents, but a lot of times when it comes to these tweaks and injuries, it's because your muscles are overshooting your ligaments and tendons. Sometimes people don't realize that your ligaments and tendons take longer to adapt than your muscles because they get less blood flow, less oxygen to them, which is why when you injure your ligament or tendon, it takes a lot longer than if you were to like tear a muscle. Um, so when it comes to building your strength up and everything, you really got to be conscious of how your joints respond. Uh, Next is, again, freeing the scapula, trying landmine presses or push-ups instead of traditional barbell presses or bench presses and things like that can go a long way, or just keeping them in the mix. And then addressing T-spine rotation. You're going to hear me say that a lot. Your elbow or your wrist, because again, joint by joint approach. If it's your shoulder that's the issue, it could be your T-spine. It could be your neck. It could be your elbow. It could be your wrist. So always worth a look. Next is elbow. This usually happens because a tennis or golfer's elbow. People go out and play 18 holes or maybe 2 or 3 rounds of golf, or they do a few hours of tennis for the first time of the season, and all of a sudden their elbow is screaming. Okay. First and foremost, don't do that. Don't just jump right in for hours and hours because it's fun and because you want to. Now, obviously, you want to do that because it's fun and because you want to, but do you want to be smart about it and be able to enjoy the entire summer, or do you want to just completely blow it on the first weekend out? that choice is up to you. So when it comes to tendonitis, bursitis issues, things like that, it's usually overuse and that we don't want to have to deal with. Now, some ways that you can help with this are one, warming up. So, warming up with like band curls and tricep push downs with the band is really, really good. Just a light band doing a bunch of curls, bunch of triceps, something in the 15 to 20 range, just enough to get a lot of blood flow in there and warm up the area before working out is really, really good. And that could potentially also help doing it before you're about to golf, before you're about to do tennis, and just doing a thorough warm up beforehand in general, like being able to twist your arm back and forth, bending, straightening the elbow, like doing some light hits or some light swings right beforehand rather than just jumping right in. Eliminating or assisting your grip if needed. So if you have some Versa grips or some lifting straps, those can be a very, very big help, especially if you're able to grip stuff, but only to a certain degree. Or you could eliminate it by choosing a modality that does not involve gripping. So, for example, like let's say instead of holding two dumbbells up at your shoulder for your squats, instead of doing like a dumbbell squat in that instance, go to a leg press or a squat machine. That way, you don't have to hold on to anything. You're just using your lower half instead of relying on your grip and making it potentially worse. Next is, again, addressing the shoulder or the wrist if needed, because joint by joint for the win. Next is wrist. If you haven't noticed, we're going in a bit of an order here. Okay. When it comes to wrist, again, that's usually due to issues like tennis or golf, or sometimes people just don't really do well with a really flexed wrist. Okay. Let me, sorry, extended wrist. I always got to double check. So when it comes to this position, like in a push up where basically you're in that butler position where your palm is facing the ceiling, some people just don't do well with that when it comes to push ups or front squats or things like that because they just don't have the prerequisite mobility. And then they jump right into push ups or front squats and they piss it off. So again, address the mobility if you can. But that being said, when it comes to tennis or golf or anything like that, do your warm up. Adjusting your grip can go a long way. So let's say, for example, you don't do well with barbell. Changing it to dumbbell could potentially help because barbell, you're in a fixed flat position. And sometimes that angle, like I mentioned, certain angles for certain people, no bueno. But when you are able to do it with a dumbbell, you could angle them a little bit or even go to a fully neutral grip. So it's like straight instead of flat, and that can help a lot too. Or you could go with like specialty bars. They make things called like the football bar, for example, for benching. Instead of the flat bar, you're able to hold on to neutral grips that you can press up and down. And that'll allow a lot more different type of motion. And in a lot of cases, it's more kind to the elbows and the shoulders as well. So that can be worth a look into. Next is eliminating exercises that piss it off. So if you are doing those push-ups or those front squats that hurt it, try a different version of those. Try something that does not require that load on your wrist until you've done the prerequisite mobility work. And then addressing your shoulder or your elbow if needed. Next is lower back and hip. Now, I put these together because they're pretty similar when it comes to what to do about them. So first is reducing hinging or bridging. Now, I will say that for some reason, when it comes to bridging and hinging, some people, when it comes to lower back and hip issues, can't bridge without it hurting like hell. But they could do like an RDL or a deadlift, no problem. And vice versa. Some people can't do like a deadlift or anything, but they can bridge, no problem. So it comes down to a little bit of variation based on what exactly your issue is and how your body responds. So if you want to test it out, and again, you're tweaked, not injured, then just do body weight. So if you could do like a wall hinge, again, you can find that on YouTube. Just look up what a wall hinge is. It's basically a deadlift without any weight. And if you could do a body weight bridge on the ground and just see if you feel anything during either, whichever one you feel less of or nothing at all, then go with that one. Or just do extra warm-up sets and really feel it out as you go and make sure that you're not pushing it to a point where it's not beneficial. Next is implementing static core exercises. During a time where your lower back or your hips are really pissed off, it can help to not do the dynamic versions of say, crunches or Russian twists or side bends and things like that, just for the time being. You do want to get to a point where you can do those down the road because it'll make you more resilient. But for the time being, when your lower back or your hip is pissed off, just do the static holds like hollow holds, planks, side planks, farmer carries, things like that can help a lot and maybe even improve your core stability more so than the dynamic stuff, depending on how you execute it. Next is using the floor or bench for support. So if your back is hurting and you're doing a bench press and all you can do is feel it in your lower back because maybe your legs are short and you really are arched like crazy just to reach your feet to the floor, going down to the floor for a bench or for a floor press is going to help a lot in that situation. So testing that out can help a lot. Another thing when it comes on to the preventative side, or possibly even might help reduce some pain, especially if it's due to having really tight hip flexors or rectus femoris, which is like the front of your thigh and the front of your hip from sitting too much. Sometimes doing things in a half kneel or a standing position can help a lot, because when you're in a half kneel, which is basically your one leg is up, one knee is down, kind of like you're taking a knee in organized sports, and you're doing, say, overhead presses or cable rows or something like that, where you're in this half kneel position, that's going to stretch out the front of your thigh, which is going to potentially provide your lower back with relief. And you're going to have to stabilize yourself, which is going to engage your core more. So you're going to get a lot of core work while loosening up potentially a problem area. And it can do a whole lot of good all at once. You're killing a lot of birds with one stone. And then next is addressing the hips or the T-spine if mobility is the issue. Or the knee too. When it comes to the hip, it could potentially be a knee thing too. So again, remember, north and south could potentially be issues. Knee issues. One of the big things when it comes to knee issues is reducing the range of motion, at least when you're starting back up and you're getting back into working out. See whatever angle your knee can handle. This is one of the things they do in PT. They'll like measure the amount of angle your knee can handle. So what you can do on your end, if your knee is bugging you, is reducing the range of motion, like we just talked about when it comes to squatting down to a bench or a chair or something like that. And if you have boxes, like making sure that you can do a certain level and then slowly taking a box away each time you're able to do so without pain. Or another thing you could do too is if you have access to a sled, going backwards and pulling it that way with a belt around your hips can be incredible for the knees, because one, it doesn't require a whole lot of an angle when it comes to your knees, and two, you could load it up pretty heavy and do it pain-free, assuming that the issue is because of your knee bending too much. Now, if it's an axial issue, which is like basically gravity working down on your knee and pressing down, and that's what's hurting, that's no good. That's probably going to make it worse. But if your issue is the flexion and not necessarily the weight on your knee, then that could be a good option as well. Um, Another thing you could do is more hinging rather than squatting. So doing RDLs and bridges rather than doing regular squatting, because again, that's going to require less of an angle on your knee. And then you can address the hips or the ankles if you need to. Ankle issues, reduce the range of motion. Again, when it comes to the ankles, it's very similar to the knee, because when your ankle gets a higher degree of flexion, then your knee is usually traveling further forward because it's your shin that's doing the moving. So if you use the same tips, it'll probably help when it comes to ankle issues too. Another thing that can help is when you're doing squats or lunges, using wedges, because when you use a wedge and you raise your heel and your toes are down, that opens up your ankle and allows for more motion in it. Because when you're squatting, yes, your knee is still bending a lot, but the angle at your ankle is a lot less. So there's a lot less bend in your ankle compared to when you're on the wedge compared to when you're going flat doing the same squat. Next is more hinging rather than squatting, just like before, and addressing the knees or the feet if needed. So if your feet are all janky, sometimes it can creep up into your ankles, and that's no fun. Some other helpful tips are use of bands or chains. So, like, let's say benching, for example, you're good up until the very bottom, and all of a sudden, that most vulnerable stretched out position is what's pissing you off. Then, and it's because of load. What you could do is try and match whatever weight you're using, but using bands or chains. So take a little bit of weight off, put a chain on that's about the same weight. And then what happens is when you bring that barbell down to your chest, those chains are starting to make contact with the floor. And when they're resting on the floor, the weight is no longer on the bar. So it's lighter as you go down and you get to that more vulnerable position. So you're able to use that and be able to do it pain free as you press up. And as you press up, you're getting back to that weight that you were using before. So you're still able to load heavy, but you're unloading the painful part. And it's the same concept with bands. So if you bring it down, less elastic, less of a stretch. And then as you press up, it's pulling on the band more, and the same exact concept. Now, if you go deep into the West Side stuff, there's a lot of differences between chains and bands. But from this perspective, as far as reducing pain and being able to train hard, they are serving a similar purpose. Next is using machines when limbs are compromised. Let's say you broke your arm and you're just like, yeah, I can't do bench press with a barbell. That's fine. Then use a machine that you can use only the other side, or just do your legs and core for a little bit. And then last but not least is training the good side. Let's say you broke that arm again. There, and back to West Side, there's actually a really good story about this, that one of the guys did break his arm, and he comes into the gym and the guy's like, we're still benching. And he's like, wait, what? And he goes, yeah, we're going to strap your arm to the bench to give you some support, and you're going to press as heavy as you can with a dumbbell with the other arm. And he's like, are you freaking crazy? Like, no. And he's like, yeah, you're doing it. So begrudgingly, he did it. And all of a sudden he realized, hey, my arm isn't really losing as much strength, and I'm able to really crank it up on this other side. And it's due to this phenomenon known as cross education. Now, cross education is a neurophysiological phenomenon where an increase in strength is witnessed within an untrained limb following unilateral, so one arm or one leg, strength training in the opposite contralateral limb. So basically, using the good side helps increase strength on the side you're not even using. Cross education can also be seen in the transfer of skills from one limb to the other. So not only are you getting stronger, but you're actually getting more coordinated on the opposite side as well. It's really weird, but it's one of those mechanisms they have yet to really like pin down exactly what the reason is. But in a nutshell, our brain and our body wants to keep symmetry. So just by doing the good side, you're helping the side that's compromised. And if anything, you're just reducing the amount of loss in strength when you come back. Another big thing, and I promise this is the last thing we're going to go over. This is a pretty deep episode. We got into the weeds a little bit, and I appreciate you guys for sticking with me to this point. So now we're going to talk about recovery. Now, staying active does help a lot, but if you don't do the right things for the other 23 hours of the day, recovery is going to take a lot longer. Suboptimal recovery can also increase the frequency of nagging injuries or tweaks. So the things that keep recurring over and over and over again can be because your recovery just sucks. So when it comes to recovery, first and foremost, focus on sleep. If you could do nothing else, anything, like just say there was only one thing you could devote your energy to, it would be sleep. Now, I know a lot of us have a very tough time with getting enough due to kids, pets, whatever. There's a million reasons why our sleep gets disrupted. But if you can figure out some strategies, and I'm always happy to give you the really good strategies that have worked for the clients. If you end up signing up for a strategy call, like a free one, I'm happy to just tell you for free how to improve your sleep. That would do so much good. Next is protein, getting at least 0.7 grams per pound of your lean body mass, or if you don't have access to a machine that gives you an accurate number of your lean body mass, like a DEXA or a in-body machine, then you could just go off of goal body weight. So just multiply your goal body weight in pounds by 0.7 and try and get at least that much protein. More is always better, and there's really no upper limit. So if you want to go crazy on protein and it's within your calories, go for it. Hydration, making sure that you're drinking mostly water, but just making sure that you're getting fluids throughout the day to the point where your pee color is pushing clear. So we don't want to go completely clear, but you want to get as close as you can to clear. And then stress management, doing your best to not increase unnecessary stress. Because right now, when you're injured or when you're tweaked, that is a stressor to your system and your body is dealing with that. If you add on doom scrolling on social media, looking at the news all day, every day, and driving yourself crazy and getting emotional, always being on the phone with that family member or that friend that just brings the drama 24/7, that will have an impact. That's not insignificant. That will make it harder to recover. So managing that stuff can help a lot. Creating boundaries, making sure that you reduce the frequency of the time you go on social media or watch the news can make a very, very big difference. So, like I said, there was a lot going on in this episode. I covered a lot of different things. And honestly, if I first heard this when I was starting personal training, my mind would be spinning. So, if you want to learn how to actually implement all this stuff to your specific situation, that's what the free strategy calls are for. So, if you want to hop on one, again, totally free, no catch. If you are interested in coaching, great, awesome. But that's not this call. We actually set up a second call for that. This is all about helping you for free. So if you're interested, go to the description or the show notes. The link is right there. Or if you're in the Fit 40 family, just comment strategy and I will reach out with more details. And if you're not in the Fit 40 family, what the heck are you doing? Get your butt in there. Get your butt in there. Okay. There's daily tips, there's weekly trainings just like this, and there's monthly challenges that are free. And we actually have our boot camp coming up where that just full disclosure, there will be a buy-in of $10, but the winner of that challenge is going to be winning $1,000. So if you want to be in that group, you got it. Or if you want to be in that challenge, the boot camp, you need to be in the Fit 40 family to qualify for the prize. So get your butt in there. Hopefully you win some money. You'll get a ton of really good tips and there's no downside. So thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you guys listening all the way through. But until next time, I will see you later. Go kick some ass.